So now let's go back to our point about how firms compete. They compete or they achieve competitive advantage by optimizing the value chain once they have decided upon their strategy. So in a sense, the value chain reflects the industry structure and shapes the industry structure. So when you look at the value chain of different organizations within an industry structure, you'll find that that they're often quite similar. They have to purchase the same raw materials in order to create the same products. But that internally, and by the way, so they purchase the same raw materials to create the same products, typically in the same ways. They might sell in similar manner, in a similar manner, and so on. If you think about it and take a look at the fast food industry, Burger King, McDonald's, Wendy's, Arby's, they all sort of sell the same way. They sell similar products. They source from the same suppliers, things like that. So the value chain essentially reflects the industry structure. However, internally, depending upon how a firm would want to compete, it shapes the organizational structure. So what I mean by that is, there are all these different components within the value chain, that each component doing a different thing within the value chain. The connections between these components, or whether particular components are merged or separate, will depend upon how the firm will want to compete. So that Apple competes on product design. So it should be no surprise to you that Apple's design group, Apple's product design group, the group that designs the aesthetics and the look and feel of its products, is tightly integrated with the engineering design group, the group that designs the computing part of the Apple computer. Okay, primarily because they want these two groups to sort of work together, so closely work together, they're part of the same group, because Apple differentiates itself on its product design. Basically, the point I'm making is that each activity in the value chain is a point of differentiation, and companies, in order to achieve competitive advantage, will look at each of these activities, okay, and optimize these activities. In addition, rather than just simply looking at individual activities, they look at the linkages between these activities. Because if you think about it, what is done in one activity, the output of one activity flows in or becomes the input of another activity. So when you source raw materials, those raw materials become the input to the operation or the manufacturing process. And how closely these activities are connected is determined by how a firm chooses to compete. So once again, back to design and manufacturing. For Apple, the linkage between design and manufacturing is likely to be tight. Whereas for some company that just manufactures a standard PC, the linkage between design and manufacturing is not likely to be tight. Similarly, for a fast food restaurant, the linkage between product development or new recipe development and marketing is likely to be extremely tight, because as soon as it comes up with a new product, it would want to create a tailored marketing campaign for that new product. All right, so just keep in mind that when a value chain is optimized, you're optimizing not only a particular activity, but also trying to optimize the linkages across activities. The next point I want to make is that scope affects the value chain. So the other thing you can optimize about your value chain, or rather really about your organization, is where you choose to compete. Do you choose to compete across the entire industry segment? Do you choose to compete within a particular geography within an industry segment? Do you choose to compete within a market segment within that overall industry segment? So do you want to compete over, say, teenagers or the elderly or working professionals? How you carve your market out is segment scope. Where you compete in terms of locality is geographic scope. What industry you identify yourself with is industry scope. And how integrated your value chain activities are is integration scope. Are you integrated all the way from developing the new materials, the raw materials, to selling it? So for example, if you are a grocery store, do you start with the farming of your produce all the way through to the selling of the produce? That the level of integration is also a scope that the company can determine. Okay? So just to summarize, the value chain shapes and reflects industry structure. It shapes the organizational structure. In order to optimize the value chain, you want to optimize the activities themselves and also the linkages within the activities. And the scope in which you compete both determines your value chain and is determined by how you want your value chain to be. Okay? And I want you now to think about how information technology can help optimize the value chain. Here's a note on forward-looking metrics in contrast with what are known as backward-looking metrics. So the financial metrics of a firm, how much money it has earned, how many sales it has completed, what its assets are, what its expenses were during that year, all the things that go into a company's annual report are what are known as backward-looking metrics. That means all the things that led to those measurements have already happened. So you can't really use backward-looking metrics to improve a firm's operation, or at least you can, if you get a snapshot or an annual report every year, too much time has gone by to actually affect how the firm performed during that year. What you ideally want are forward-looking metrics that tell you how the firm is going to perform, as opposed to how it has already performed. The idea behind the balanced scorecard is to bring in these forward-looking metrics. So for example, let's just take sales, okay? If you simply measure closed sales or sales that actually took place, yeah, those are backward-looking metrics. On the other hand, if you measure new leads, those are forward-looking metrics, because if you know that the number of new leads that you're getting is rising, that means you're doing better. On the other hand, if you find that the number of new leads that you're getting is falling, you're likely to do worse in terms of future completed sales. Okay, so counting new leads that are coming in is a forward-looking metric because it impacts completed sales and it impacts future revenue. Revenue by itself is a backward-looking metric, while new leads that result in sales are a forward-looking metric. This picture is intended to indicate what a balanced scorecard does or what it's used for. So the idea is the company comes up with a vision, a strategic vision, yeah? And then you do some business planning. So I'm starting at the bottom of that picture here. You do some business planning based on the strategic vision. Yeah, you show how it connects to, you show how these plans connect to the vision. You also figure out how you want to translate that vision into operational terms. So once again, to repeat, you come up with a strategic vision or a strategy, you do some planning, yeah, you translate that into actual activities, and you have to now link the two. And that linking and communication is what links the planning to the actual activities that you're doing. And then you have the reverse step, which is you do those activities, you measure how these activities are performing in terms of meeting business goals, yeah, and you put a feedback and learning mechanism in that allows you to continuously improve. So the left side is the translation from the business planning to the actual operations, and the right side is the feedback and learning that's providing you feedback from the operational part back to the business planning. And the balanced scorecard is the element in the middle that connects all these different elements, all these different components. So now, what is the balanced scorecard as opposed to what it is used for? The balanced scorecard consists of 4 components: a learning and growth component, an internal business process component, a customer component, and the financial component. So the idea is something like this. Let's say you have to improve something, a component within your value chain, some activity within your value chain. Well, you have to train your people or give them new knowledge in order to improve that component. Then with that new knowledge, they can modify how they work within that component, or they can modify the internal business processes within that component, okay? When they modify those internal business processes, hopefully they get improvement in what they do. That makes for a better product, that makes the customer happier, and that improves or results in additional sales or more profit. Okay? Hope that makes sense. So basically, you train the folks, you give them new knowledge, you train them to do their jobs better. They end up doing their jobs better. Therefore, they end up making a better product. Therefore, they end up in selling more. And therefore, they end up in making more money. Okay? Something like that. Hope that makes sense. And finally, this slide gives an example of a balanced scorecard. When you look at the slide, look at the columns of the tables in the slide. So the leftmost column shows the elements of the balanced scorecard and how they are linked. The next column, the objectives column, identifies for each level of the balanced scorecard what objectives need to be achieved. The next column, measures, describes how you will measure whether or not you've reached those objectives. The next column, targets, identifies what the target metric is for that objective. So if there's a cost reduction metric, which is the measure, then the target might be $100,000 reduction in cost. And the last column, initiatives, is what are the things you're going to do in order to achieve those objectives. So this example is an example of a balanced scorecard for a regional airline. What kind of regional airline? Probably American Eagle or something like that, okay? So corresponding to the 4 levels of the balanced scorecard, there's a learning objective, there's an internal business process objective, there's a customer objective, and there's a financial objective. At the learning objective, it is aligning the ground crews with what needs to be done. The internal objective is this learning that the ground crews go through will help them improve turnaround times. Because they improve turnaround times, their flights will be on time, flights will be lower cost, and therefore you will get more customers. Also, these improved turnaround times will directly lower costs. And because you have flights on time and you have more customers, you have increased revenue. And because you have both lower costs and increased revenue, you have profitability. So once again, note all these different components in this balanced scorecard. It is the objectives or goals that you want to achieve. That's the leftmost column. These goals are linked. See how the linkages take place between these goals, starting at the lowermost goal and going all the way to the uppermost goal, which is profitability. See what the objectives are for each of those goals. See what the measures are for each of those goals. See what the targets are, what you're shooting for in each of those goals. And on the rightmost column, see what you're going to do in order to achieve those goals. Once again, most importantly though, see how all these are connected together. And that's the goal, or that's the reason for using a balanced scorecard.